She said it on a Tuesday, not during a fight, not at the end of some long, exhausting argument that had been building for weeks. She said it at the kitchen table, between a half-eaten bowl of oatmeal and a cup of coffee she had already stopped caring about, the way someone might mention that the weather had changed. "I don't see you as my husband anymore, Terrell. We're just roommates at this point." Terrell Beaumont set down his fork. He did not raise his voice. He did not ask her to repeat herself. He did not reach across the table for her hand the way he might have done 5 years ago, or 10 years ago, or even 2 years ago, before something he still could not fully name had quietly shifted in the architecture of their life together. He picked up his fork again, finished his eggs, rinsed his plate, and went to work. That was the beginning of everything. He was a civil engineer. He had spent 18 years building things that were meant to last. Bridges, retention walls, drainage systems that nobody thought about until the rain came and nothing flooded. His entire professional life was about invisible infrastructure, about doing the careful, unglamorous, precise work that held everything else up without ever being seen. His marriage, he had always believed, was built the same way. He had been wrong. Or rather, he had not been wrong about what he built. He had been wrong about who was standing on it with him. Her name was Phyllis. Phyllis Annette Beaumont, née Corbin. She was 41 years old, a hospital administrator who ran 3 departments at Northside Medical with a precision and authority that her colleagues openly respected and occasionally feared. She was not a small person in any sense of that word. She had opinions about everything and the vocabulary to defend them. She wore her natural hair in a crown of tight coils that she maintained with a dedication that Terrell had always quietly admired, even in the years when everything else between them had become complicated. She was not a villain. That is the thing that made all of this so difficult and so important to say clearly before anything else. Phyllis Beaumont was not a cartoon. She was not a cold woman who had married Terrell for security and spent 18 years counting down to the moment she could discard him. She was a complicated person who had gradually, and perhaps without fully realizing it, stopped treating her marriage the way you treat something you intend to keep. She had gotten comfortable with his presence the way you get comfortable with a load-bearing wall. You stop noticing it. You stop being grateful for it. You walk past it 100 times a day and never once think about what would happen if it were gone. Terrell had watched this happen. Slowly, over years. He had tried, in his quiet and untheatrical way, to say something about it. He had planned dinners that she canceled for work. He had booked a trip to Savannah for their 15th anniversary that she had shortened from 5 days to 2 because of a budget meeting she described as non-negotiable. He had sat across from her at restaurants where she answered emails between appetizers and entrees, and he had said, calmly, that he felt like he was disappearing inside their marriage, and she had nodded in the way that people nod when they hear the words but not the weight behind them. He had not disappeared, though. He had done what his mother taught him. He had sat with it. He had tried to understand it. He had spent the better part of 2 years deciding what it meant. And then she had sat across from him with her cooling oatmeal and told him plainly what she thought he was. A roommate. So Terrell Beaumont decided to believe her. He did not announce anything. He did not present a list of grievances or schedule a conversation about boundaries. He did not call a therapist or suggest they try couples counseling one more time. He simply began living, with complete and quiet sincerity, inside the terms she had defined. Roommates. The word had a very specific meaning. He knew exactly what it meant because he had lived with roommates before Phyllis. He knew the precise emotional temperature of that arrangement. You coexisted. You were civil. You did not share finances in any way that was not strictly practical. You did not cook for each other. You did not plan around each other. You kept your lives parallel rather than intertwined. On the Wednesday after that Tuesday conversation, Terrell went to his bank on his lunch break and opened a personal checking account. He had maintained a joint account with Phyllis for 18 years. He did not close it. He simply transferred his direct deposit. He sat down that evening, after dinner, with a legal pad and a calculator. He listed every shared household expense: mortgage, utilities, internet, property taxes, HOA fees. He divided each number in half. He wrote Phyllis a short, courteous email, the kind you would send a landlord, outlining his proposal for splitting household costs equitably and asking her to confirm her agreement. She read it from across the living room, her phone in her hand, and looked up at him with an expression he could not fully decode. "You're serious," she said. "You defined the terms," he said. "I'm just honoring them." She did not respond. She went back to her phone. Terrell took that as a yes. The first 30 days were the adjustment period. Terrell cooked for himself. This was, unexpectedly, the detail that landed hardest for Phyllis. Not the bank account, not the email about expenses, the smell of food that was not offered to her. He had cooked for both of them for the entirety of their marriage. It had been his thing, the quiet domesticity he had claimed and performed without being asked because he genuinely enjoyed it. Sunday mornings, holiday meals, the random Wednesday night when he would come home from a long day on a job site and still find the energy to make something from scratch, because feeding people was one of the ways he knew how to say things he found difficult to say out loud. He stopped. He made his plate. He sat at the kitchen table or at his desk in the second bedroom he had quietly converted into a home office. He ate. He cleaned his own dishes. He left the kitchen exactly as he had found it except for whatever he had used and already washed. Phyllis started ordering delivery. Terrell noticed this. He said nothing. What he did instead was use the time he had previously spent orienting his evenings around their shared life. He signed up for the professional development courses he had been putting off for 2 years. He called his old college friend Garvis Webb on a Thursday night and actually talked for 90 minutes instead of the usual 12-minute check-ins he had been managing between Phyllis's schedule and his own exhaustion. He started going to bed at 10 and waking up at 5:30, not to get ahead of the household, but because that was when his mind was clearest and he had things he wanted to think about without interruption. Within 6 weeks, he had completed the first module of a project management certification that would move him from senior engineer to department lead. His supervisor, a meticulous woman named Corliss Harmon, who had been watching Terrell underperform relative to his actual capability for years, called him into her office on a Friday afternoon. "Whatever changed," she said, sliding a project portfolio across her desk. "Keep doing it." He took the portfolio home. He sat at his desk until midnight reading every page. It took her 47 days to say something. He knew the number because he had been counting, not out of strategy, but out of the same instinct that made him count structural tolerances on a bridge design. He was a man who tracked things. It was how he understood the world. She knocked on his office door on a Sunday afternoon. He was on a video call with Garvis and 2 other friends, all of them laughing about something that had happened at a high school reunion 30 years ago that somehow kept getting funnier with age. He held up one finger to the screen, put the call on mute, and opened the door. Phyllis stood in the hallway in the oversized Howard University sweatshirt she had owned since before they met. She looked at the screen behind him. She looked at his face. She looked at the organized desk, the printed schematics, the coffee mug that was actually from a conference he had attended in Atlanta 3 weeks ago, a trip he had taken without mentioning to her because roommates did not owe each other their itineraries. "You went to Atlanta," she said. "Conference. Work. You didn't tell me." "I told the person who needed to know. My supervisor." Something moved across her face. He recognized the expression. It was the one she wore when a situation had developed further than she had anticipated, and she was recalibrating in real time. "Are you happy?" she asked. Terrell thought about the question. He answered it honestly. "Happier than I've been in a while," he said. "Is there something you needed?" She shook her head slowly. She went back down the hallway. He unmuted the call. Garvis gave him a look through the screen. That was Phyllis, Garvis said. It was not a question. That was my roommate, Terrell said. Nobody laughed. But Garvis nodded, slowly, the nod of a man who understood something complicated and was choosing not to diminish it with words. Her name was Navia Osei. She was a structural consultant who had been contracted to work with Terrell's firm on a bridge rehabilitation project in the 4th month of what Terrell had started privately calling his reorganization. She was 38, Ghanaian American, possessed of the particular kind of directness that people sometimes mistake for coldness until they realize it is actually just the absence of performance. She did not flirt with Terrell. That is important to say clearly, and to keep clear throughout everything that follows. What she did was notice him. In a Tuesday morning meeting where 3 other engineers were talking over each other about load calculations, she watched Terrell sit quietly until there was a gap, then lay out 3 sentences that resolved the disagreement with such precision that the room went briefly silent before everyone simply moved on. After the meeting, she stopped him in the hallway. "You do that on purpose," she said. "Wait until the exact right moment. No point in talking before you have something worth saying," he said. She looked at him for a second. "How long have you been doing this work?" 21 years. "And you're still here, not running your own firm." "I like building things," he said. "I'm not as interested in managing people who build things." "That's either very humble or very strategic," she said. "Ask me again in a year," he said. And he walked back to his office. He thought about that exchange for the rest of the day, not because of anything romantic, but because it had been a long time since anyone had looked at him and seen something worth examining. Here is where the story shifts. On a Thursday evening in the 5th month, Terrell was organizing files on his personal laptop when he found an email he had not been looking for. He had not been conducting any investigation. He was not the kind of man who went through his wife's things or set traps or hired anyone to follow anyone. He had simply been looking for a scanned receipt for a home repair from 2 years ago, for tax purposes, in a shared folder they had both contributed to across the duration of their marriage. The email was not addressed to him. It was a forwarded message that Phyllis had sent to their shared household folder years ago for some reason neither of them probably remembered, buried under 100 other documents. It was between Phyllis and a colleague at the hospital whose name Terrell recognized as someone she had mentioned casually, periodically, across the last 3 years. A man named Wendell Price who ran the facilities department. He read the email once. He closed the laptop. He sat in his chair for a long time. The email was 2 years old. It was not explicit. It did not confess anything illegal or definitively prove anything that a court would call evidence of anything. But it was the kind of email that a person in a marriage reads and immediately understands. The particular tone, the particular intimacy, the way 2 people write to each other when they have already agreed, without saying it, that they are something to each other that they have not named aloud. Terrell understood that what he had been calling a slow deterioration of his marriage had not been slow and had not been a natural deterioration. He understood that the wall had not gradually weakened. Someone had been quietly removing the material from the inside. He did not touch the laptop again that night. He went for a 2-hour walk in the dark, through the neighborhood he and Phyllis had moved into 11 years ago, past the houses of neighbors whose names he knew, past the corner where the magnolia tree had finally grown tall enough to cast real shade, past the church where his mother had made him attend vacation Bible school every summer until he was 14. He walked until his feet told him he was done. Then he went home, went to bed, and slept for 7 hours. In the morning, he called his attorney. His attorney was a woman named Bertrice Holloway who had been the best real estate and family law attorney in the county for 22 years. She had gone to Spelman. She had clerked for a federal judge. She had 3 degrees on her wall and a way of listening to a client that made you feel like every word you said was being properly filed for future use. Terrell sat across from her and explained his situation with the methodical calm of a man presenting a structural assessment. The marriage, the statement Phyllis had made, the email, the financial changes he had already implemented, the current state of the household. Bertrice listened without interrupting. When he finished, she said, "You've already started protecting yourself." "I've been living honestly inside the terms she gave me," he said. "That's different." "It's also better for you legally," she said. "Financially, you're already separating. Emotionally, you clearly have documentation of a relationship that changed before this year." She paused. "How much do you want to know?" Terrell thought about that question with the same care he gave every question that had real consequences attached to it. "Everything," he said, "but I'm not interested in using it as a weapon. I want to know it so that I can't be surprised by it." "Surprises are expensive." Bertrice nodded slowly. 18 years is a long time," she said. It was not an attempt to talk him out of anything. It was an acknowledgement. "Yes," Terrell said. "It is." He stood, shook her hand, and went back to work. The second piece of evidence did not come from Terrell's investigation. It came from a phone call. His mother-in-law, a woman named Idella Corbin who was 73 years old and had never once in her life said anything she did not mean, called him on a Saturday morning. Phyllis was out. Terrell was making coffee and reading through the new project specifications Corliss had forwarded. "Terrell," Idella said. "Yes, ma'am. I raised that girl. I know her." He waited. "She told her sister," Idella said. "About a man at work." "About," she stopped. He could hear her breathing. "I don't know everything that happened. I don't know how far it went. What I know is that she let something into your marriage that she had no business letting in. And I know that whatever is happening in that house right now, you didn't cause it." Terrell set down his coffee mug. "I'm not calling to take sides," Idella continued. "I'm calling because I have watched you love my daughter for 18 years, and you have never once been anything but decent to her or to this family. And I felt that you deserved to hear from somebody who was in a position to know that this was not your failure." The line was quiet for a moment. "I appreciate that, Idella," he said. "You're a good man, Terrell Beaumont," she said. "Don't let anyone's choices make you forget that." She hung up. Terrell stood in his kitchen for a while. He looked at the counter where he used to make Sunday breakfast for two. He looked at the empty chairs at the table. He made his coffee and went back to his desk. But something had settled in him that had not been settled before. The thing that had still been uncertain, the part of him that had wondered if he was misreading the email, if he was wrong, if the distance in his marriage was something he had accidentally created, that part went quiet. He was not wrong. He had not told Nevaeh anything about his personal life. She had not asked. They had developed, over 4 months of working on the same project, the kind of professional friendship that operates with a natural and unspoken discretion. But one evening when the project team went to dinner after a long site visit, and the rest of the table was loud with relief after a difficult week, Nevaeh said something to him quietly. The way people say things when they are not sure they should say them, but say them anyway because they are true. "You seem like a man who carries more than he shows." Terrell looked at her. "That's most men," he said. "No," she said. "That's not most men. Most men carry less than they show. You're different." He looked at his glass. He thought about his mother. He thought about the kitchen table on a Tuesday morning and a sentence that had changed the shape of his life. "My wife told me earlier this year that she didn't see me as her husband anymore," he said. "That we were just roommates." Nevaeh did not react with dramatic sympathy. She did not say she was sorry or tell him he deserved better or reach across the table. She looked at him for a moment with that direct and unperformed attention she had. "What did you do?" she asked. "I believed her," he said. Nevaeh was quiet. Then she said, "That's either the most painful thing I've ever heard or the most self-respecting." "Ask me in a year," he said, the same thing he had said to her in the hallway months ago. She smiled, not at him in a way that meant anything beyond the recognition of a moment between two people who understood each other. He drove home that night thinking about the question she had asked. What did you do? He had believed her. And in believing her, he had started building something else, something he hadn't had the space to build while he was spending all his energy trying to hold together something that only he was holding. 8 months after that Tuesday morning at the kitchen table, Phyllis asked to talk. She did not knock on his office door this time. She came to where he was sitting in the living room on a Friday evening, reading, and she sat down across from him in the chair she had always preferred, the one by the window with the good lamp, and she said, "I think I made a mistake." Terrell put his book down. He gave her his full attention, the way he always had. She had been crying recently. He could tell, not because she was crying now, but because of the specific way her face looked when she had been through something difficult and had processed most of it before arriving at the conversation. "The man at work," she said. He waited. "Nothing happened the way you might think it did," she said. "But something happened, and it was wrong, and I have been living with it." "I know about the email," he said. She absorbed that. She did not ask how, or which one, or what he meant by it. She simply absorbed it the way a person absorbs information they expected to eventually arrive. "I don't know when I stopped treating you the way you deserved," she said. "I've been trying to figure out the exact moment. I can't find it. That might be the most frightening thing, that I can't point to a day." Terrell looked at his wife of 18 years. He looked at the woman who had made him laugh at their wedding so hard that the videographer had captured it, and they had rewound it 50 times in their first apartment. He looked at the woman who had sat with him at his father's funeral and not said a single word because she had understood, somehow, that words were the wrong thing. He looked at the woman who had, somewhere in the middle of a busy and accomplished life, stopped being present inside her marriage while staying inside the house. "I want to fix this," she said. He breathed. "Phyllis," he said, "what exactly do you want to fix?" "Us," she said. "Our marriage." "We haven't had a marriage for longer than 8 months," he said. "You said so yourself." She flinched. "That was wrong of me," she said. "No," he said. "It was honest. That's what was hard about it. You were being honest about something that had already happened. You named it. And I appreciated that, even though I didn't show it at the time." She looked at him with an expression he had not seen on her face in years. Something careful and frightened beneath the composure. "What are you telling me?" she said. And here is where Terrell Beaumont did the most difficult thing he had done across the entirety of this long and reorganized year. He did not raise his voice. He sat in that living room chair with the same physical stillness he brought to every room he occupied, and he spoke to his wife plainly and without theater, and what he said was this: "I am telling you that the man you said I wasn't to you anymore. I spent the last 8 months becoming him for myself instead of for you, and I cannot unknow what I found out about how he got here. I cannot unchoose the person I've become in this room that you told me was just a room I was renting. I can't go back to being invisible inside my own life and call it a marriage." Phyllis had tears on her face. "I'm not doing this to punish you," he said. "I want you to hear that clearly. I am not angry. I am not trying to hurt you. But I am telling you the truth the way you told me the truth 8 months ago. I don't think we should keep living like this. Not because I hate you. Because I don't. I respect you. I have always respected you. But I think we've been holding something past its time for both our sakes, and I think the honest thing is to acknowledge that." "You're asking for a divorce," she said. "I'm saying that I've been living as your roommate for 8 months, and I've learned something important inside that arrangement," he said. "I learned that I can build a life that fits who I actually am, and that life doesn't have room in it for someone who had to be reminded I existed." The room was very quiet. Outside, the neighborhood was doing what it did on Friday evenings. Someone's kids were somewhere nearby being loud in the best way. A car pulled slowly past. The magnolia tree at the corner had dropped its blooms weeks ago, and the branches were bare and dark against the pale evening sky. "I loved you," Phyllis said. It came out without performance. "I know," Terrell said. "I loved you too. For a long time I loved you the way I was supposed to love you. Quietly and structurally, and in the places where nobody was looking. And I think you needed something I didn't know how to be. And instead of saying that clearly, you just stopped. And I think that's something you're going to have to sit with." He said it without cruelty. He said it the way his mother had taught him to say hard things, with precision and without venom, because venom was for people who wanted to wound, and Terrell Beaumont did not want to wound anyone. He wanted to be free. "I'll have Bertrand's office send over the initial paperwork next week," he said. "We'll divide everything fairly. The house too, if that's what makes sense. I have no interest in making this harder than it has to be." Phyllis sat in the chair by the window for a long time after he stood up. He made himself a cup of tea in the kitchen, and he stood at the counter and drank it while the evening came fully down outside, and he felt the specific weight of something ending that had needed to end, and the specific lightness of something that, despite the cost, was also the truth. Victory, he understood in that moment, does not always feel the way you expect it to. Sometimes it feels like standing alone in a quiet kitchen with a cup of tea, understanding finally that quiet was not the same as lonely, and that the two had simply lived together for so long in his life that he had stopped knowing the difference. The papers were filed in March. Corliss promoted Terrell to department lead in April. He took it not because of ambition, but because the work was genuinely interesting, and he had stopped having reasons to avoid being fully present in his own professional life. He kept the house. Phyllis agreed to it. She took the investments in her retirement account and the car. Bert Rice negotiated it with the quiet efficiency of someone who had done this before and believed in getting it right. His mother called him on the day the divorce was finalized. He drove to her house in the late afternoon and sat at her kitchen table the way he had sat at it when he was 7 years old and 12 and 19 and 30 and now 44. Odessa Beaumont made him a plate without asking what he wanted and set it in front of him. "You all right?" she said. "I'm all right," he said. "You did the right thing?" He thought about that. He thought about the email and the years of quiet cancellations and the Tuesday oatmeal and the Friday living room and his wife's face when she finally said what she meant and his own face when he finally said what he meant back. "I did the honest thing," he said. "That's the closest to right I know how to get." She sat down across from him. She looked at her son for a while. "That's close enough," she said. He did not call Navia. Not then. He understood that that was a door that, if it ever opened, would open in its own time, not as consolation, not as replacement, not as the next chapter starting before the last one was fully read. He was not a man who moved from one thing to the next before he had understood what the first thing had cost him and what it had taught him. He had learned, across the length of this particular year, that he had been waiting for other people to confirm his worth for longer than he should have. He had built his professional confidence on measurable outputs and his personal confidence on being needed. And when the need had been withdrawn, he had needed to figure out who he was when nobody was measuring him. He found out. He was a man who woke up at 5:30 and thought clearly. A man who listened until he had something worth saying. A man who built things meant to last. A man who could sit with pain without performing it. A man whose mother had raised him to act in the right order. Understand first, decide second, move third, never in reverse. He was enough. He had always been enough. He had simply been standing in a room that had stopped being able to hold that truth. There is something that people in long relationships tend to forget, and it is this. Presence is not the same as permanence. A person can be in your house every day and be entirely absent. And a person can be absent from your life the moment you stop giving them a reason to stay present in their own. What Phyllis had done, whether she fully understood it or not, was treat a permanent thing the way you treat a temporary arrangement. She had treated investment the way you treat an amenity. She had treated the care of a man who showed up quietly and completely the way you treat background noise, something you notice only when it stops. And Terrell had made the single most difficult and most important choice available to him. He had believed what he was told, not as a punishment, not as strategy, not as the opening move of a game. He had believed her because the most self-respecting thing a person can do when they are told who they are to someone else is to reorganize their life around that information rather than spend the rest of it arguing against it. He had been told he was a roommate, so he became an excellent one. And in becoming an excellent roommate, he discovered that he was an even better human being than his marriage had given him the space to be. That is not a comfort. That is not a happy ending without weight. His marriage ended. 18 years of a shared life were divided and filed and finalized, and that is a real thing, with real grief inside it. And Terrell Beaumont did not pretend otherwise. But he was standing upright, and he had done it without shouting, without cruelty, without making anyone small so that he could feel larger. He had simply told the truth when the moment came, in the right order, and then he had gone and made himself a cup of tea. That is enough. Sometimes that is everything. Some people spend years trying to convince someone to see their value. The wisest people in the room spend that time making sure they see it themselves. If this story stayed with you, if it made you think about something real in your own life, then you already understand why stories like this matter. Hit the like button if Terrell's patience taught you something. Subscribe because there are more stories waiting that were built to make you think, not just feel. Drop a comment. Tell me, was Terrell right to walk away? Or should he have fought harder at the beginning? There is no easy answer. That's the point. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded that their silence is not weakness and their patience is not surrender. We'll see you in the next story.